about myself. I'm Jan Meskins and I'm active as a data and AI strategy consultant.
Modern Data 101 presents the Modern Data Masterclass.
Hello, I'm Jan and welcome to the Modern Data 101 Community Masterclass. Today I will talk about data strategy, more specifically, how to craft a data-driven organization by balancing data usability and data literacy. Before I dive into the subject, a little bit information about myself. I'm Jan Meskins and I'm active as a data and AI strategy consultant. This means that I help organizations to get value from data and AI, not just technology, really focusing on business value. I'm also a trainer and a coach in the same subjects where I also focus on getting impact from AI and data. I do this in my own startup, CVAX, standing for Strategy for Analytics. If you would like to contact me, you can send me an email or connect with me through LinkedIn. I'm always looking forward to feedback or to get questions about this masterclass. So to introduce the topic, I want to share 4 frustrating data experiences with you. These are experiences that I've seen in many organizations where I worked in data projects. The first one is the fact that business users can't find the information they need. Business users have an idea. They know roughly which information can help them to solve a business problem, but they can't find what they need because there's a plethora of spreadsheets, because data can be in any database, but they don't know which one, because there are so many reports and users don't know in which reports they need to look. So finding the right information is hard. Secondly, sometimes business users need to find the information in a more technical component. For example, in a data warehouse. This implies that business users need some BI skills or sometimes some technical skills. For example, they need to be able to create a self-service report, or they need to be able to query a database and so on. But we see that business users logically often lack these skills. And thirdly, even if business users know which report they need to use, even if they have the right skills to find the information can contain data quality issues. This is because input data that has data quality issues, which is bad, breaks everything downstream, reports, dashboards, and AI. So issues at the source ripple down to your reports. And the fourth thing is that all things that a data team can deliver towards business users, being reports, dashboards, process automations, AI models, and so on, if we track the use of these, there's only a limited usage of those artifacts. So we see that data teams can deliver a lot of potential value, but at the end, those elements aren't adopted by the business. If I put those 4 frustrations together, I can summarize this as data adoption is a challenge. We can request business users to start working with data, but in practice, we see that it's harder than expected. So getting better data adoption is the real challenge in building a data-driven organization. And that's the subject of this talk. How can a data strategy help to craft such an organization? I will handle this in 3 topics. First of all, I will zoom in on what is a data-driven organization. Then we will jump to the core part. What is data usability and what is data literacy? And then we will end with a data strategy that can help us to improve your usability and literacy. And this makes up our table of contents. So let's start with the beginning. Let's start to zoom in on what is a data-driven organization. In a data-driven organization, we will expect users that they work with data, that they know which data they need to work smarter, to improve the way they work today. But before we jump into this, it's important to know the data users need to work with, where does this data originate from? What are the sources? How is this data transformed in what we see and what we provide to the users? In this schema, I represent this as a big ball of mud because it can be a bit unclear where data comes from. So let's first zoom in on this. Zooming in on the origin of your data is starting with the basics in your organization, and that are people and processes. In every organization, people are doing certain tasks and they do these tasks in a process. It doesn't it's not important whether a process is formally described or not. It's important that there are tasks and there are people doing this in a more or less structured way. They do this to bring strategic value in an organization. For example, they help to produce goods, they help to sell something, and so on. And this brings really strategic value to your organization. Now, in those processes, people work with tools. Tools like a CRM system or an ERP system are typical for office workers. In those systems, they are doing actions, and those actions help them to complete their tasks. And at this stage, we talked about people, processes, and tools, but we didn't say anything about data. And here's the clue: data is being created by those tools. The tools you're using, those are creating the data that we need in a data-driven organization. And that's what we often call data sources. So now we know where's the data and where does the data come from. But now we want to activate this data to grow towards a data-driven organization. And that's what we do by introducing another component, a data platform. A data platform will combine or get all relevant data sources and combine it into artifacts that are usable to work with. We call this data sets. A data platform will transform the data from your sources, will integrate data, recombine it until you have data sets which can be handled by your end users. As you see on the slide, this is also often called a data product. In a data product, you have your data set, and your data set has some certain characteristics to get it even more usable. For example, it has metadata to make it understandable. It has certain accessibility rules, and so on. It's discoverable. So a data product is an advanced version and a very usable and reusable version of a data set. Now, once we have this data platform containing those products or data sets, we want to provide that to our business users so that they can start to work smarter. But in many cases, business users will not work directly on those data sets. We provide them with applications that will let them interact with those data products. I often compare this with a smartphone containing multiple applications, and those applications interact with your data. For example, reports. Reports are visual representations of your data. They make trends visible. For example, AI apps, which make it possible to interact with your data using a conversational interface. You can just ask questions and you immediately get an answer from your data. Spreadsheets, which are often raw exports from your data, it are apps that you can use to create an insights. You also have KPIs, you have analytics, and so on. So a lot of possibilities, a lot of apps that can be delivered to work with data. In this presentation, I often use a yellow rectangle as an icon for such an app. And as you can see, an app is used again in the process. So in the original process where people were creating data, they will also reuse data through applications. And as you can see, this is the case at many stages. In many steps, data will be used in applications. It can even be used to redesign your processes, to optimize them. And to make this picture complete, there's also a possibility that your data apps are embedded in the tools that you already know. For example, your CRM system can have some AI capabilities, or an ERP system can contain its own reporting module, and so on. So this is the big picture. This is how data flows from process to your application and is being picked up again in the same process. If we go to this picture, we had the big ball of mud, which creates data where we expect users to work with. We now know already a bit more. We know that this data originates from sources, is being transformed, is then being displayed or being provided through an application, and this application is then served to your business users. And that's actually working data-driven. Let's now zoom in on this, working with applications that run on top of data. If we zoom in on this, we can see it in a flow like this. You have your data. Your data is shown in an application to your users. Your users are working with this application to gain impact. Actually, you have your data, you have some actions, and this will result in impact. I will now give you different tastes of data applications and how users work with those. First of all, you have descriptive analytics, applications describing what happened. They use data to visualize what has been happening in the past. For example, an application can show that your sales was lower this month than the previous months. And then you have the green part here. This is the human effort that a user needs to invest to bring the output of this application to turn this into an action that leads to impact. So a user can start to analyze. If the sales was lower than expected, he can try to test what could be the cause, do a lot of research until he can do the right or can take the right action. Then you have diagnostic analytics. Why did something happen? This is slightly more advanced than what happened. Instead of making assumptions about possible root causes of what you see in your data, diagnostic analytics will provide you with the underlying root cause why something happened. So in the case that your sales KPI was low, this diagnostic analytics will give you a potential reason. For example, your e-commerce platform was slower than expected, leading in less sales. And then you have predictive analytics. What will happen? Instead of looking to the past, we will look to the future. We will try to predict with AI and statistical models what will happen in the future. Do we see a certain trend, a seasonality, and so on? The better we can forecast this, the better the action that we can take. This is already a bit more advanced, and the human effort is again a bit lower to take the right action. And then we go to the most advanced part. The first one is prescriptive analytics. What should I do? Prescriptive analytics will not only predict the future, but will also give you things or improvements that you can do to get a better future, to get a better result. The first one is decision support. The system clearly suggests you actions to do, but the human analyst or the human working with this application needs to do this action. And you can also have decision automation, that there's no longer a human in the loop. Here we speak more about an agentic system. A prescriptive agentic system will automatically execute a certain process steps between certain boundaries, but a user is no longer in the picture here. Here you see 4 big types of data applications. And what we see is that the human effort can vary from very high, human needs to do a lot of effort to take an action, to very low. A user is no longer in the loop and no action needs to be taken. Data is being used behind the scenes. If we then go to the core of this talk, working data-driven, Then we can say that working data driven is using data to do a smarter job. And this can have several tastes. It can be using your expert data knowledge. If you have data experts in your organization that are really good in doing statistics, analyzing data, and so on, they can turn descriptive analysis into a complete view. They can do a lot of manual effort to have the right insights and to take the right steps. That's one thing that you can do in a data-driven organization. Secondly, you can also use easy-to-use tools. Tools that are easy to use by people who are not data experts. So instead of looking for raw data exports where your experts work with, here you are looking for tools that are usable for anyone. And thirdly, you can use data behind the scenes. Even without a human in the loop, you can use data to optimize the way you work. Now, we've seen what is working or what is a data-driven organization. That's an organization where we use data to do a smarter job. Now we will zoom in into data usability and literacy and how this can help you to shape a data-driven organization. First, I retake the slide from the previous part. Working data-driven is using data to do a smarter job. But here we have two important parts. The first one is knowledge, expert data knowledge. It depends on the knowledge of your people, of what you can expect to do with data. The second one is easy to use tools. The usability of your data tools is crucial to get people on board of or to let people adopt data in their working processes. And here there are two important terms. The knowledge is often what we call data literacy. Tools usability level is what we call data usability. I will now zoom into those two components, into literacy and usability. And let's first start with data literacy. Data literacy is something that we can describe in four characteristics: reading data, communicating data, working with data, or creating useful things with data. Let's first start with reading data. Reading data is a capability that someone can read data to take the right action or to get the right insight. For example, someone is able to read a report and to draw a conclusion. That's what's reading data. You can have several levels of maturity here, but that's something that is core in working with data and that we might expect from many users. And then you have communicating data. It's not because you can read data that you can communicate those conclusions to other stakeholders. Here, users are aware of what they see in data, but they can also convey a message to other people about their data-driven research. And then you have working with data. This is a skill used by people to generate reports or to create reports. They use raw data, they use data products, and they filter it, they transform it until they have a new report that can be used by other people. And then you have creating data. More specifically, creating data products or creating data sets. This is a skill for experts in your data-driven organization. For example, engineers, scientists, data analysts, who will investigate your raw data and turn this into a usable data product. Now we've seen data literacy as four characteristics. In an organization, you can turn those four scores into a data literacy score. You can weight those scores and you can turn it into an average, which is your data literacy score. For example, on the high data literacy side, you can have your experts who can create data products. On the low data literacy side, you can have basic data reading skills, some basics that you expect from many people in your organization. And in between, you have everything else. For example, drawing and presenting conclusions, fine-tuning data products and creating reports, and so on. So data literacy is a score. This score reflects how people can work with data, and this is built out of those four characteristics. And then we jump to data usability. Data usability is the UX layer on your data. How easy is it for a user to start working with data? And this is something that you can represent with a learning curve. How long does it take before a user can start working with data in a certain application? And that's your learning curve. A high learning curve is in the case of raw and unprocessed data. This data is actually not ready for analytical use. But if you expect users to start working with it, then it will take some time before they can get insights and results from this raw and unprocessed data. A low learning curve is in the case of an AI data assistant. In this case, people don't need to know much about the underlying data. They need to be trained to ask the right questions in natural language to your data assistant, and this assistant will then reply with the right answer. So you can use natural language, asking a question, getting an answer, way easier than working directly with raw and unprocessed data. And in between, you have everything else. For example, reports and dashboards, which are a bit easier to understand than a data product, which is actually the basis of your reports and dashboards. So here you have your learning curve, you have your usability, and as you can see, if you have a high learning curve, you have a low data usability, and if you have a low learning curve, you have a high data usability. So now we've seen literacy and usability. Let's now combine those two into another visualization. On an x-axis, we have data literacy, going from low to high, people with basic skills and data experts. And then we have data usability, depending on the characteristics of the applications that you use to work with data. This can be either low or either high. And now I will share a common mistake that many organizations make. And that is providing raw data to everyone in spreadsheets and require those people to find the information they need. So they expect from everyone that they are capable to find information using raw data in spreadsheets. And I can say that's not the case. You cannot expect this from everyone. Especially people with low data literacy skills will have a lot of difficulties to get the right information from this raw data. So I would not advise this. Instead, I would advise to make certain personas in your organization and to divide the way you work with data across those personas. For example, everyone in your organization with only basic data literacy skills should have access or can have access to highly usable data applications. Using easy to use tools, they can find the information they need. And on the other hand, you will have your data experts. And those data experts can work with complex tools and raw data to draw conclusions, to make reports, and so on. So in this case, you have two big groups. You have your experts. Your experts will create the right things that can then be used by the rest of your organization with lower data literacy skills. And if we take this pattern and we use some colors, we get this graph. The green zones is where there is a right balance between literacy and usability. The red zones is where there is no balance between literacy and usability. And as you can see, your experts are over here. They have a high data literacy, so they can work with raw data immediately. And here you have people with a basic data understanding, and they work with very easy to use tools. And if we revisit this and we plot some quadrants on this, we get our data experts who assist in creating data products. We have our the people with average data literacy skills who use those products, who fine tune it and create reports and dashboards. And then we have all the rest that are capable to read and use data. So this brings me to a famous quote of Brent Dykes. Data in the hands of a few data experts can be powerful, but data at the fingertips of many is what will be truly transformational. And it's especially this part, the fingertips of many, what can make data really powerful. Because if you have only a few data experts and the rest of your organization doesn't understand data, you will get a huge bottleneck. While data is at heart or in the fingertips of many in your organization, you can do way more. So, up till now, we've seen what's a data-driven organization. Then we've zoomed in into data usability and literacy. And now we will take the step to data strategy. Data strategy as a way to increase your usability and literacy. A very simple definition of a data strategy is that it's an enabler for everything that you want to do in your organization to make actions in the literacy and usability quadrant happen. They will help to increase usability, they will help to increase literacy, and to connect people with the right literacy skills with the right usability data applications. Now, before I introduce a data strategy, I will zoom in onto what is a business strategy. In every organization, if you have an axis or a quadrant, not a quadrant, if you have a visualization like this, with on the y-axis value and on the x-axis time, you can plot first of all the ambition level of an organization. Every organization has an ambition to reach in 1 year, 2 years, and so on. And then you have a business strategy, a business strategy that will help you to realize this ambition. And on this business strategy, you can also plot certain data projects, things you would like to do with data and AI to work smarter, to work better, to reach your ambition. And now, what is a data strategy? A data strategy is actually all actions that you take to help to realize those data projects as good as possible. So actually you create some foundations that make it possible to do things with data. For example, you increase your data quality. If you increase data quality, it's easier to realize a certain project. And I will now compare this into another world. I will compare this with a building. For example, if you have a building like this on the right side, you see you have some weak spots. All those pink elements are weak spots, and if you don't treat those weak spots, your building can start to collapse. For example, you can have unclear roles and possibilities. It's not clear who needs to do what with data. Your data quality is low. Data delivery is going really slow. There is a bottleneck to deliver the right things in the right time. And if you deliver something, the quality is not high. So you have several pink weak spots which you need to tackle. And with a data strategy, you will tackle this and you will get a stable basis for your organization. And on top of this stable basis, you will be able to create the products that you want and the apps that you need. And if you go back to our usability and literacy quadrant, we can also plot those actions. We can answer questions like, how do we organize our experts? Do we create one team of experts, or do we create a more data mesh-like organizations where you have domain teams with experts? What about data ownership and stewardship? How do we divide those roles? What about self-service reporting? Who will be able to create reports themselves and who will not? What about AI and data literacy? How will we increase this? What about data quality? How to collect data product metadata and so on? So actually a data strategy are all actions that you take to answer those questions. And on top of this, a data strategy will create strategic direction. It will create a line of actions that you take to reach your ambitions. If you don't have a data strategy, that's what's visualized here. You have all kinds of things that you do with data, but there's no line in it. And if you have a data strategy, then you do all things to reach your ambitions to go towards value. Now, I talked a lot about a data strategy, but I didn't say anything about the core elements of a data strategy. And again, I like to visualize this in a visualization like this, with on the y-axis your value and on the x-axis your time. The first part of data strategy is your vision. Your vision outlines how you would like to work with data in 1, 2, or 3 years. That's actually a view in the future depicting how you would like your organization to transform your organization by means of data and AI. And then you can plot a roadmap that will help you to go to this moonshot. It are actually all things you want to realize to get towards this data vision. For example, you want to work on your data culture. You want to increase data literacy. You want to increase the data quality. You want to roll out certain AI capabilities and so on. Those are all actions that you take to go towards your data vision. But of course, you can have a roadmap to go towards a vision, but we all know the world changes. You cannot create a roadmap and never adapt it for months or years. Therefore, it's important to have roadmap governance. Roadmap governance to keep your roadmap in sync with reality. And this is what most organizations do in a data strategy. They create a vision, they create a roadmap, and they keep it in sync with reality. But I want to do more. There's one important component missing here, and that's the communication strategy of your new data strategy. It's very important to explain how we work with data and what we want to change in a clear language to the people in your business. We want them to change, to adopt new ways of working. This requires clear communication and storytelling. And so you have a clear story of your data strategy, which you can tell to people with every data literacy skill level. And then in that case, you get people that become fan of your data strategy and who want to change instead of getting fear from changing the way we work with data. So I now explained what is a data-driven organization, what is data usability and literacy, and what is a data strategy. Finally, I will share you 3 lessons learned in rolling out this trajectory in multiple organizations. In those lessons learned are drawn from workshops, from assignments I did with multiple customers in multiple organizations. As a conclusion, I will now share with you 3 lessons learned. 3 lessons learned from real-life projects I assist to roll out a data strategy. First of all, rolling out a data strategy means talking to people. You need to bring people together, talk about what are the current issues, what are use cases on working with data, and so on. And the best way to do this is in a workshop format. You can do it physically with sticky notes, markers, big walls, and so on, but you can also do it virtually, which works better in some contexts. Now, there are some challenges in organizing workshops. First of all, it's very hard to find a time slot. If you want to plan a workshop now, in some organizations, you need to wait for 2 months before people have room in their agendas. Secondly, you need to get the right people around the table. It's good to analyze your stakeholders to find the right people and to put them together. Thirdly, a facilitator needs to be there to create a safe space to guide the workshop and to ask the right questions. It's important to prepare this facilitator that he has a minimal context of the organization. This is mostly my role. I try to be the unbiased facilitator to help everyone to put the right information on the table. And then fourthly, there's the fear of missing out. If you are in a workshop, people often get in the momentum and starts to list up many things, but you only have a few hours. It's key to stick to the plan and not to say everything that doesn't make sense in the context of a data strategy. Secondly, storytelling is very important in a data strategy. You have your leadership level, you have the people in your organization, and there are a lot of communication lines that are available. For example, your leaders in your organization need to talk to each other. That's a horizontal level. People at many places in your organization need to talk to each other. That's also a horizontal level. And then you have bottom-up communication from the people in your organization to the leadership and from leadership to the organization. So strong storytelling is essential because the more people you have, the more communication lines you have, and the more chance that a message is misinterpreted by different people. And this is why I started to draw. Saying things in words is possible, but it's often hard. If you create a simple schema or a simple visualization of something, it's easier to convey a message. And thirdly, if you roll out a strategy, that's a good plan, but please take the culture in your organization into account, because culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you roll out a data strategy in an organization without an analytical mindset, you need to take other actions than if you roll out a data strategy in people who already think in numbers. I often compare this with this expression. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I often see the people who lead the horse to the water as the data team or people working on a data strategy. They create the water, all things you can do with data, your reports, your AI models, and so on. And then you have the people in your organization that you lead to this water, but you can't make them drink. If they don't want to use a report, it's difficult to force them. And that's the difference between culture and strategy. Culture is what's in the DNA of your organization, and strategy is the way you want to change this. And this was my last slide. So I would like to thank you for your attention. And of course, this is a pre-recorded session, so there was no chance to ask questions, to give remarks or feedback. But you can contact me through email or add me to LinkedIn. And please, if you have feedback or questions, you can always ask it to me. If you're interested in the slides, you can download it through this QR code. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope to see you later again.
Access the Modern Data Masterclass for free on moderndata101.com/masterclass.